Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our next guest, Mr. Joe Osborn. Joe, how you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing great.
Glad to have you on the program. We got a little bit of applause for you. I just want to bring that in for you.
Yay.
It is,
Standing O's, Joe.
we've been waiting, so patiently. This is your work in the studio. You're no stranger to take one, take two, and now take three. This is take three for this program, getting you on the program, and we're excited to have you.
You probably could have done it in one.
This is the one.
I believe this is it. So, Joe, how you're doing great this morning, and we're excited to have you on. One of the things that we've been talking about, obviously, some of your studio work is you're known for being one of the most prolific recorded bassists in the world. And some of your track record speaks for itself. Have you been keeping up playing? And I know you've been doing a lot of producing. Let's talk about right off the bat some of the most recent producing work. I know that you've been working with a newer artist. And I wanted to ask you about this artist and how you came about getting into the production seat.
Are you mentioning Matthew Davidson?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Matthew Davidson, a young guitar player, if I'm not correct.
Yes, that's absolutely. He's more than a guitar player. He's a polished musician. He's actually amazing. There's a local writer for the local newspaper a few months ago did an article on child prodigies from this area.
Right.
Which there have been many over the years. And so he wanted to talk about Matthew Davidson as a child. He asked me the question, do you think he's a prodigy? I said, well, absolutely. At 12 years old, he played like a seasoned veteran.
Wow.
And
I was going to ask. So, had you heard his? You discovered him via this article, and did you when you saw him play? I mean, what knocked you out about his playing? I mean, obviously you've seen a lot of people come and go, and a lot of musicians. What struck you about his playing?
Well, the first time I saw Matthew, we were actually playing together on stage.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, which was perfect. People asked me to judge a player and say, you think he'd be okay to bring into the studio? I can't judge a player unless I play with him.
Right.
Okay.
Because that's the only way to feel him. Everybody, people play on the beat and they're articulate and all that, but to play with them shows you what they actually feel like. It was on stage here in Shreveport at the Municipal Auditorium for some political mess. And Matthew came in. His mom had gotten in touch and said, could Matthew come by and play a song? Of course. So that's the first time I saw Matthew set up on stage with the band. And I thought he'd probably come on and do his one song and leave. He got up and played a Chuck Berry song, Johnny Be Good.
Right.
And nailed it and played the guitar like
he was ringing a bell.
Like it's ringing a bell. But then he stayed on stage and played behind everybody else that came on for a couple hours.
Wow.
And his attitude, his demeanor, his just overall stage presence. He's 12 years old.
Right.
And a star. Everything about him said star.
That's incredible. And I mean, when you've seen players, people who have got a natural gift. I mean, is there a way to put it into words to define what it is that they possess? I mean, at 12 years old seems is such a young, early age to be able to possess such. I guess distinct prowess on an instrument. I mean, how do you when you're looking at somebody like that and you're being wowed by them? What's going through your mind when you're seeing this in front of you?
Well, if you say, okay, the 12-year-old kid's going to come by and do a song,
Right.
But you expect some kind of nervousness or not to actually project,
Sure.
so to speak. And Matthew was just the opposite of that. His smile, his attitude, and his appreciation to the other musicians. He recognized the other musicians.
Right.
He wasn't just all into himself.
Right.
He was a team player, a part of the band right off.
Right.
And well, that's an unusual quality, and it has to be noticed.
Sure. And did you and how did the relationship develop? I mean, from going from this performance, you obviously were pretty impressed, knocked out by it. How did you get into the role of becoming a producer on his first recordings?
Well, I didn't really know what to do about it, but I was talking to him and his mom after we were done about Matthew has got unusual talent.
Right.
And he will do well. We weren't at that part talking about any kind of association. I was just letting them know what I thought about his talent.
Sure.
And that it was special. And so then we would talk again and again. So it came about that we'll go in the studio and do some of these songs. He was all into 50s rock and roll, which I thought was unusual for a 12-year-old.
Of course, especially now, right?
And he always hated effects, the fuzzed out guitar.
Sure.
He didn't do that. He played the guitar. He didn't play the effects.
Right.
And he didn't like necessarily this new noise that's going around. So we're doing those old songs and some old blues things from back at the beginning of blues, not the so-called blues we hear now.
Right.
Which to me is all noisy guitar.
Right.
He was playing the old style blues and the way correctly and those old songs, and he loved that. Well, let's go in the studio and put some things down.
Right.
And of course, he had already been playing all around the area and in a 5-state area. So he's very, very experienced with that, with live playing and all that. But to go in the studio is a totally different world.
Of course.
From playing live. And so I told his parents, I said, it could take a day in the studio for Matthew to get adjusted to the studio with the headphones, and you can't bring your Marshall amp in and turn it all the way up.
Right.
And it's all together and adapting to something now. Well, we got set up, and the first song we did was Johnny Be Good. Matthew counted it off and played it perfectly, sung it the way he wanted to sing it, and it was an acceptable take.
Right. Wow.
Right away, it was like he had been in the studio all his life.
Incredible.
So that's the kind of talent this guy's got. And it has developed over, well, this was 12, he's 16 now.
Wow.
And his musicianship has developed into wonderful.
And so, and obviously as he gets older, it's just going to progress and, becoming a young adult and continuing down that path. It seems like there's a lot of opportunity down the road for Matthew. It seems.
Well, this is his love, and he'll be going to college somewhere after high school, which will be probably another year. I'm not sure yet, about another year or so, and he'll be majoring in music.
Right.
And so he'll develop that all the way. He's actually absolutely star quality, and it comes down to, as everybody knows, the song.
Right.
When he comes across that right song, he'll be a monster.
Right, of course. And that's it. And of course, obviously, you're no stranger to some profound songs, some of the biggest songs of say the 20th century. I was going to say one of the earliest in the '60s when you were working in L.A. and doing a lot of the session work. You had the fortune of meeting another group of youngsters, the Karen and Richard Carpenter, and is there a similarity, a parallel from, say, an artist like Matthew to, say, a young Richard Carpenter coming to your house, recording in your garage? Is there a similarity in that kind of respect towards the young musician?
Well, yes. They were. Karen was 16 at the time.
Wow.
They just showed up at my garage studio. People say, you discovered the Carpenters, and I wasn't looking for anybody.
Right.
They came to the studio.
They discovered you.
They discovered me. And so at some point I heard Karen sing. Richard was playing, and a song called Ebb Tide. I don't know if you know that.
Of course.
Sure.
Old song. Not a simple song.
Nope.
16-year-old kid sung that like a pro. Yeah, so there is a perfect parallel, to what I saw in Matthew.
Right.
Well, I didn't know what to do about it, as usual, but we talked and found out Richard had some songs that he had written, didn't have any way to record them, and so I offered the use of the studio for them to come and do that. But they had already been playing at this age as the Richard Carpenter jazz trio.
Right.
Karen's a wonderful jazz drummer, even at that age, and that developed into wonderful. And Richard had studied classical music since he was a baby, and so they were accomplished musicians at that point.
Right. And so you must have.
anyway,
I was going to ask you. I mean, you must have had. Obviously, being around musicians all the time, playing. I mean, when you're seeing young kids who are classically trained, have obviously Karen's voice and her drumming stood out, and obviously Richard as a musician. It must have been such an interesting kind of, I guess, surprise. Did you lead the recording of, say, the demos in which they used to get signed eventually?
Yeah, well, we worked in the studio at least 2 years or more, off and on.
Wow.
And did a lot of Richard songs and did some experimenting. Richard really got familiar with stacking the vocals.
Right.
That we were just playing around one night. Said, let's see how many vocals. I had a 4-track Scully tape machine.
Right.
And let's see how many we can stack before losing quality.
Yeah.
Let's just play with this. So we did one of Richard's songs, a cappella. The two of them started and stacking and stacking.
Wow.
Wound up with 38 stacks.
Holy cow!
Wow.
And it's on the it was on the first album. It's on their box set.
Right.
What's the name of that? I don't know. I don't know what the name of that box set is, but it's on there, and God, it sounds wonderful. But anyway, yes, they took Richard took some of the tapes that we had done over the 2 years, and got their deal with A&M. And of course, I was there for all that.
Right.
And
how did I mean, obviously, you were a go-to bassist. I mean, as far as session work.
First call.
Yeah, I mean, people reaching out to you. How was the Carpenters sessions? Were those a little bit special because you knew them early on, or was that just business as usual as far as being a session player?
Well, it was always business as usual, but of course I had a different feeling about that.
Right.
Knowing in the first place that it was going to be really good, and that's always one of the problems with what makes it not fun when it's not good. And we saw a lot of that.
Well, I bet.
So it was business as usual. It was still go in and grind it out.
Right.
We would start with just bass and piano and drums. And you've heard the records; they put the whole world on it when
Right.
it gets done. And but it was go in at 2:00 and work 3 hours on a track and maybe get a rough take, go to dinner and come back and finally get a take.
Right, right.
So, it wasn't all fun. It was grinding it out.
Work. Obviously, just real studio, being in the studio. I was going to say one of the film, Denny Tedesco, who was on our program a few months back. Friend of the program, brought on the Wrecking Crew film, which is now hits theaters and has gone on to DVD. And you're featured in this the documentary, and they talk about that. How's the release of this film and showing you obviously a lot of your peers and friends at that time and kind of retelling that story, has that the film, since it's been released, how has that affected you as far as your being rediscovered for some audiences and kind of being cherished again for new younger audiences around the world? How has that affected you?
Well, I don't know if it affected it. What was very interesting and nice to see was the reactions from some of the people, the surprise that their favorite groups didn't do their records.
Right.
And I was surprised to see the surprise in their faces that they didn't really realize that, but there's no way they could because a lot of the groups didn't put the musicians' credits on the records.
Right.
A lot of them did, and there were some that begged us not to tell anybody that we played on the record.
Right.
But to see that audience reaction to that revelation that the groups didn't do the record was interesting. As far as effect, I don't know. Of course, we already knew that.
Sure. Obviously, yes.
Yeah. So, but now to find out that people ask the question, how did it feel being involved in all those monster records and with these? Now it was business as usual every time.
Right.
That's all we were doing was working a lot. We didn't know that we were affecting people with that music.
Right.
And to find out that we did, a guy came up to me saying, "I've been making a living playing the bass for 30 years, and you're the reason I started playing."
That's incredible.
Oh, man.
That's a moving moment.
Right.
Man.
Sure.
To think that we actually might have changed somebody's life. With all that.
I mean, the impact of the music that you performed on is, I mean, obviously it defines a generation. I mean, it is the soundtrack of many people's lives. A generation of kids growing up in the 60s and 70s. I mean, a lot of the, obviously, I mean, to run down a few of the songs like Bridge Over Troubled Water or California Dreaming, some of these songs are a huge part of people's makeup, growing up.
Also, Joe, this is Jeremy. Because you are primarily a sideman, a Joe Osborn fan has to do his due diligence.
Just seek it out.
To figure out that you're his favorite bass player, his or her favorite bass player.
Right.
They have to do some research, figure out who played on what, and by the time they get to you, it's like, oh, he played on all this other stuff. So, I would say a Joe Osborn fan, like predisposition, guy's already got good taste.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you mean fans or producers, or who do you mean?
Let them all in.
Well,
I don't mean to be divisive at all.
We didn't know
Ah.
that we were anybody's. Well, we finally realized if the producer calls you back a lot, he likes you,
Right.
But you never knew. If you go in and work for somebody, you don't know what they thought unless they call you again.
Yeah.
Right. Now, was there at a moment? I mean, obviously, when you came to Los Angeles and you started doing the session work, I mean, and you were working around the clock doing several sessions, maybe for different different producers around town. Were you keeping track of the session dates? Obviously, I mean, in any given day or week, you may have played on, a dozen different singles by different artists. At any point, were you like, keeping track of the artist or the record, or were you just doing the next date and not really logging that kind of information?
Well, I didn't keep track as well as I should have because now trying to put a song list together,
right?
I don't remember half of what I played.
I'd imagine.
Man.
No, so I didn't keep the kind of record because we had a workbook. We'd put down 2 p.m. on Tuesday. You're at Capitol with so and so.
Right.
But that would be all the information there. Sometimes we didn't know who the artist would be, and I wouldn't go back and put in who it was. So
Sure.
I didn't keep the kind of records I should have kept. No.
Right. I mean, and that's tough because you've got there's so many sessions and so many records obviously being cranked out in that period, and you've got other bass players who are also in on sessions. Is it been hard to keep track of other people claiming to play bass on tracks that you've played on, things of that nature? Is that always been a difficult point for you?
And I didn't understand that. A difficult point to what?
Meaning other bass players maybe claiming that they've played on a track that you've played on.
Yes, I understand the question now. No, it didn't bother me at all.
Wow.
And there wasn't a lot of that. There
Right.
were some that would claim that they played on something that they didn't, and they always get nailed with it.
Right.
Now,
So no, if I have any question about whether I did or not, I don't claim it.
Right.
And
now
so no, it didn't bother me at all that somebody wanted to do that. I couldn't understand why they would.
but that brings up an interesting point to me, Joe. I'm not 100% certain. Did you by any chance play on Dale Hawkins' Susie Q?
I didn't play on Susie Q.
Okay.
That was James Burton played guitar on that record.
Thank you very much, because famously Roy Buchanan said that it was he playing guitar on that track.
No, well, I know.
And
I knew Dale Hawkins very, very well. I lived with him. He lived with me.
Wow.
I know him, and we kept in touch all the way till he died. And
It's pretty much common knowledge that that's 100% James Burton. But
it's
this to me is one of the
James
most.
Burton,
Yeah.
But Dale told me this. Roy, he had started to make a little noise and get some work, and Dale told me that Roy asked for his permission to say that he played on Susie Q because it would help him get work.
Right.
Of course, Dale said, "Man, you can say anything you want to do." No, that was James Burton, absolutely,
Wow.
no question about it.
That, I mean, again, that's of course, that's a great piece of history. I mean, the studios. Was there a favorite studio? I mean, obviously, a lot of studios, once you're in there, they all tend to kind of have some certain vibe to them. And you did all of the studios in Hollywood, bouncing around. Was there a certain studio that you were more at home with? When you're doing these sessions, or did they all kind of tend to run together?
What was your favorite room?
Well, no, there were differences. We did an awful lot of work at the studio, Western Recorders and Studio 3.
Wow.
We did so many, all the Mamas and Papas records, a lot of the Fifth Dimension records, and on and on and on. We worked a lot. So, like, even being familiar with your chair where you sit.
Right.
And the engineers, all familiar, made a difference. To go in a new studio was an adjustment that had to be made. That's one of the people say, what do you think the main quality for being a studio player is? Adapting.
Right.
Constantly to a new situation. Yeah, no, there were some that were more comfortable than others. Actually, at Western Studio 3, a famous engineer there, Wally Hyder, built a studio and copied that room.
Is that right?
And he called it Studio 3. So, and we did a lot of Fifth Dimension records in that studio and a lot of others. But that's how important. I guess that's the answer to your question. Was some more comfortable?
Yeah.
He actually copied one because it was. Yeah.
That's and it's such an interesting. I mean, those studios, obviously, a lot of folklore. I mean, things like, the Beach Boys records being recorded there, and now I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a brand new documentary. Oh, I'm sorry, not documentary, but a feature-length film about Brian Wilson, and they do a lot of recreating the scenes of say Sunset Sound and Western, doing a lot of the Pet Sound Smile sessions and whatnot, and it's interesting now that we're getting down the road how now seeing this group of musicians that you played with now being depicted with actors and being performed on the big screen. Did you ever? I mean, obviously you probably didn't realize that what you're doing was becoming history. But does it have a certain place in your heart to know that now 45 years later, what you did is now being depicted on the big screen?
Yeah, well, that's what we talked about earlier. We didn't know anything about what that was,
right?
Until it was over.
Yeah.
And then looking at it, and then seeing how it's still been talked about and used, and that. No, we did. We just learned that ourselves.
It's so interesting, and to think about that. Was there a as far as in those sessions? I mean, you've worked with a number of producers. What do you think defines when you're working on a good record versus a bad record? What do you think? Was there sessions where you're like, this is obviously not going well, or this is not going to be a good record? Was there identifying qualities when you were doing that work that you were like, this is not going to be good?
Absolutely not. And this question came up once. Larry Knechtel asked me, when you're playing on one of these trash sessions, it's not going to be anything.
Right.
Nothing. Well, in the first place, you have to respect the people. It could be somebody from in the middle of Iowa on the farm, saved up enough money to bring the kid to Hollywood and play with the best musicians in the world.
Right.
Paying full price. We have to respect that and give him what he expects from us.
Exactly.
Also, you never know what's going to hit.
120% every time going in, no matter who it is. Now, what they come out with, they don't come out with a hit record because the song's not a hit, but they got the best track they could ever possibly buy.
Right.
Yep.
So there's satisfaction there. Larry Knechtel asked me a question about, when you're on one of these, if you come up with a great lick, do you use it or do you save it?
Right.
I said, you better put it back where you got it, because you're going to clog up your creativity if you don't, and it's totally unfair. You got that lick from that song and being in that room at that moment.
Right.
Use it or lose it.
Was there a lot of, when you, let's hypothetically speaking, or looking back, when you're presented with a track, say, for instance, like the Fifth Dimension, Let the Sunshine In, the bass line on that second half of that song is that's your creation. How much of did that, a song like that, or other songs where you're reading off of a lead sheet and you're doing what's being told, or you're allowed to improvise?
Well, Bones Howe. Now, that question, it depends on
who's producing.
Who it
okay,
is.
Right.
Bones Howe left us alone.
Okay.
We could do whatever we felt. And then if it was something that didn't fit, he would certainly say, well, maybe something else,
Right.
But that particular track there was totally spontaneous.
Wow.
And the way, I don't know if you've heard this, Bob Alcivar was the arranger on those, at that point, on
Sure.
the Fifth Dimension records. And he'd always write a part. And we got through Aquarius. That's pretty much what was written, with a few inflections that we were allowed to do. And when it went into the segued into Let the Sunshine In, the part was pretty similar, just a different tempo and a little bit different feel. But it was still simple. So Bones came out to me and Hal and said, "Can you guys play more in this section?"
Right.
That's all he said.
And you did.
And the next take was that take.
Is that right? Wow.
No talking about it, no thinking about it, just played it.
Thank you for answering my telepathic question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's like, I wanted to know, it's like, had you been planning that? Did you play it on a run-through? But it seems like you're just right in the trench, and that was what you played with the band. Wow.
Now that sort of thing would happen from time to time, like going through on the rundowns. You'll start to venture from the chart and just start to play.
Right.
And the producer will recognize that and say, "Well, oh yeah, let's do that."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
No,
So
that didn't happen that way at all. We got one instruction: play more.
that is, you know, that's, and you, I think that there's an interesting relationship because obviously, you know, when you're getting that kind of a very small instruction and then being able to communicate that, you know, through the music and being able to lock it in just right off the bat, you know, the next take, it's a very, I guess, instinctual kind of, you know, skill that you must kind of hone from doing all of these sessions and kind of being able to you know, develop that skill. And it's
well, now a lot of that is the feeling and the relationship between the musician.
right.
Now, I was playing with Hal Blaine, early '60s, still doing demos for grocery money,
Wow.
and we were so locked in right from the start. It's called feeling the beat in the same place. That's a whole other subject. There are different places to feel the beat.
Right.
I loved Earl Palmer,
Sure.
but I never locked in with Earl because he played behind the beat.
New Orleans style.
Not dragging, but behind the beat.
Yeah.
Right.
Hal played a little on top of the beat, and that's where I felt the beat. So we didn't have to think about where the beat was. We just played where we felt it, and it was together. But then we got so used to each other that either one could go into a fill or something, and the other would be right in the middle of it instantly.
Right. I mean, would you say that? I mean, you've did a lot of sessions with Hal. Was he one of your favorite drummers to record with on a session?
Well, I think he had to be my favorite, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Now, I want to change gears a little bit, talk a little bit about the technical side of your instrument and playing. You know, starting with the electric bass. Did you ever? Were you ever an upright player before you picked up the electric bass? Was it always?
No, I was a guitar player.
Right. So you never touched the upright and just went straight.
I touched it once.
Is that right?
I said, "Whoa,
on the way to electric bass.
this is not for me."
So how did the flat wound strings come into play going to an electric bass?
Oh,
That was what they came with then, right?
This is part of my whole story that I never planned anything.
Right.
I never planned anything. Fender, well, the first Fender when I became a bass player in Las Vegas, I went to the store and bought a precision bass. That's all there was.
Right.
And we'd had those flat wound strings on it. So then when I got the jazz bass, after starting with Ricky Nelson, we were going to go on a world tour after Traveling Man was such a big record.
Right.
Fender wanted all their new things to go on that tour, so they sent this jazz bass that nobody had ever seen. It wasn't in the stores. It was the prototype. Well, it was strung with those heavy gauge flat wound strings. I didn't know there was anything else.
Right.
I played just what they sent me.
And does the story and correct me if I'm wrong, is it true that you kept those same strings on that bass for years?
Oh, 17 years.
Wow.
17.
Now there weren't those actual strings that were shipped. I don't know whether those were Fender strings or what.
Right.
I was playing at Whiskey Go Go with Johnny Rivers, and I thought, well, I probably ought to change strings. So I went to the store. This is LaBella was one of the biggest string makers, and they still are.
Right.
Yep. Best flat wounds.
I want some bass strings. What kind of bass do you have? I have a Fender. Okay, here are your strings. They had strings marked for Fender, K, whatever basses there were at the time.
Right.
And he gave me the ones that were marked for Fender. And you had no choice of gauges. This was the string.
Wow.
And it was the same gauge and flat wound as was the Fender, the original Fender
Right.
strings. And those kept on the bass for 17 years.
Good gosh.
Wow. Well, and you know what's interesting is, I mean, obviously strings, you know, they get a life, and when you start playing, you know, the oils from the hand, all the wear, it's amazing to think, and I think that's probably the beauty of the flat wound is it doesn't have those grooves to kind of get corroded. But it's amazing to think that those strings, how many songs have that had those specific strings on them.
Would you wipe them down every couple of sessions, Joe, or just
No,
set
I
it
never
and forget
wiped
it?
anything off.
Wow.
But
That's
I
where the
think
funk
guitar
is.
players have to do. Larry Carlton would change strings after every section.
Right.
It has to do with the acid in your hand. I don't think I ever had that problem.
Also, that old boy was playing round wounds, and a lot of gunk gets
Well, that's
stuck
true,
there.
and it would
Yeah.
collect more. Yeah.
Right. If I touch a guitar, I don't even have to play it. It'll corrode right in front of me.
He has a corrosive touch. Eddie is known to have many acids in his fingers.
Right.
But when I got ready to change those strings, I thought, I'll go down and buy some more of these.
And then they
They
had
never heard of them.
300 different kinds of strings.
Right.
The next time you went to the store.
What? No, you can't have that. So
Hey,
I got what I closest I could find. They did have flat wounds. It's hard to find even flat wounds now. They're all around.
I bet. I mean, it comes from a different. I guess the popularity of those strings. I mean, that was all you could get back, 50 years ago, and now they're hard to come by. It's very interesting. Did you always stick with the jazz, the Fender Jazz, as a bass, or did you experiment with other basses? Was that the bass that suited?
I never had one.
Is that right?
Wow.
One bass fit that. I was always puzzled. I see people bring 4 or 5 guitars and 3 or 4 basses. That bass worked on everything.
Right.
Obviously, you can hear it all kinds of music. It worked on everything. You don't need 5 basses.
What? But would you bring an instrument to double with, because you could get a higher rate of pay from the musicians union with that? Wow. So you never doubled on like a Fender 6 or brought an upright?
Actually, we started before we found out we could charge double. We would put down doubles whether we played it or not.
Right.
You were worth it.
Two doubles, I think, made 30% extra.
Well,
You should have tripled them.
that's great.
Double the triple double.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's legends of Tedesco bringing like bazookies and classical guitars and banjos to gigs just so that he could get
the extra cash.
the extra 30%.
Oh, well, he tells that. He admitted that
He-
publicly, that he would just pick up a different guitar on the next song.
He'd bring
Give
trunks
him
of
a
junk
double.
to the session.
Do you have any? I mean, when you were working, and I mean, it was a nonstop. I'd imagine just nonstop sessions. That was your office, doing the studio work. And then when you moved to Nashville, and you continued to play on some of the biggest tracks. Artists like Kenny Rogers and whatnot. Was there I guess did you move to Nashville to basically to pick up more work, or to slow down? How did that transition going from L.A. to Nashville come about?
Oh, well, I was ready to quit.
Is that right?
In 1970, and I actually bought a farm in the Ozarks.
Oh, wow.
I was going to go there. I didn't want any more. I was just tired of the pace.
Right.
And so a friend of mine said, listen, you don't want to quit. You want to do it in a different place. That made so much sense to me. Well, Nashville was the obvious place.
Right.
Sure.
And that's exactly how and the reason I wound up in Nashville. But I knew a couple of producers that I had worked with in L.A. from Nashville. So at least I had a starting point.
Right.
And of course, the track record, the reputation, I got a lot of curiosity calls. They said, let's see what this hotshot really can do.
Right.
And they might have been surprised that I went in and played their country song the way they expected.
Right.
And I played on more country hits than I did in Los Angeles.
That's which is pretty crazy. I mean, was the workload in Tennessee in Nashville, was the workload the same as it was in L.A. in the '60s, or was it? I mean, were you still doing 2-3 sessions a day kind of thing?
Well, it would get to be periods of very busy. No, it wasn't as much.
Right.
What was going on in L.A. at the time will never be done anywhere ever again.
Right.
But Nashville, during that time, they were making a lot of country records as well. They were all busy, and it was a particular group. I think it was referred to as a clique.
Right.
And you can't get in that unless somebody dies.
Right.
So, but as I said, I knew enough people to get a start, which is what you have to have. People say, "How'd you get started? How do you get started in the studio?" You don't unless somebody brings you in.
Right.
Which is exactly what happened with me. That's another story.
Right. I mean, and so what? I mean, you said earlier, that you never planned anything. And would you say that like your career and your notoriety for being this a hotshot bass player or a sought after session man, was that? I mean, do you look at it as when you look back in your life, was this a little bit of luck, or was it a little bit of obviously hard work? How do you? I mean, in a looking back kind of sort of thing. I mean, how do you define
it? It was all being put in the right place at the right time.
Right.
Now, I'll skim over this. I grew up with James Burton.
Right.
And he had already been working with Ricky Nelson for a couple of years before I graduated from high school. He quit school to go to do that, which is another story. But I had wound up in Las Vegas as a guitar player. Roy Buchanan was the other guitar player.
Wow.
Had no bass. I became a bass player, and then after a year, wound up back in Bossier City in the same bars we left.
Right.
As a bass player. Now, the end of this story, this is the way that my book starts, is to describe all this. Anyway, I had to have been involved in what I was involved in. I had to be in Los Angeles.
Right.
As a bass player in a situation that would get me noticed. Well, James Burton came in this club, and he didn't know I had started playing bass. He said, "Ricky's putting the band back together. If you want to play, I'll let him know." Okay. 2 weeks later, I was in Los Angeles in Ricky Nelson's band.
Wow.
As a bass player, and that got me noticed.
Right.
James Burton took me and put me where I needed to be.
Wow. And that
I wouldn't have been able to get there otherwise.
Right.
Man, that's some stuff.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean,
you there?
Oh yeah, wait.
Oh yeah, we're
Yeah,
just
Hello?
speechless.
Can you hear us?
Oh gracious.
Oh boy. We
I can't hear you.
we hear you all right. Oh, we hear you.
gracious.
Joe, can you hear us?
Yeah, did you hear that story?
We sure did.
Yeah, we got the whole thing.
We had a flashback to last week.
Oh man, time travel.
I was worried. No, I was going to say it is I mean, being placed into that position, and that kind of kicked off, a working, jobs coming in through L.A. I mean, it just is such a wonderful story and just a wonderful journey. And
But I wasn't looking for anything else. To be from Bossier City starving to be in Ricky Nelson's band, what more could there possibly be?
right.
That was it. But then the very next, and after a few months, we cut Traveling Man, which was the biggest record Ricky ever had.
Sure.
Ooh.
So right away, I'm on the biggest record in the world. All of that made it mushroom.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
That didn't stink.
Is there? I mean, and are there certain sessions in your mind that really stick out as that kind of define your? I guess that experience for you. Are there certain sessions or producers or records that you remember making that are kind of like that really define the '60s working for you, or the '70s? Are there certain sessions there that you recall with fondness?
No, I don't think that's really so.
No,
It was all.
such a blur.
all
Yeah.
It is. It's a blur.
Right.
And of course, I can't talk about what I did without mentioning Hal Blaine and Larry Knechtel.
Sure.
It was like a family, we were one
Right.
Man.
in the studio, and producers started to realize that, and that's why we wound up together so much.
Right.
So.
Absolutely, just a wonderful. And lastly, in closing, we've shared a lot of this music this morning with our audience and playing a lot of this stuff. And Hal obviously comes up, and we're going to be having Hal on the program for next week, and continuing talking about this music. When was the last time you got to actually sit down and play bass with Hal? Do you have a last?
Well, it hasn't been that long. We did that Glenn Campbell movie where
Oh yeah.
we did the last song.
Right.
I played with Hal, and then I saw Hal later in L.A. for the movie.
Right.
And we talk on the phone.
That's great. And it's.
If I could, can I mention one thing that I'm endorsing a new bass?
Oh,
please do.
I endorsed that Lakeland for a while, which folded, and but Dan Lakin, the builder of that bass, is building a new bass, which is a monster, and you can see that bass at dlakenbasses.com.
Okay.
And you can also see more about Matthew on MatthewDavidson.net.
Sure, and we'll post these website links up on our website, on our page.
Now, Joe, I know we have limited time with you, but to make that bass, did you loan him yours? Did he have to go over that with a fine-tooth comb, or did you basically say, I want it to be...
Lakeland,
Okay.
yes, I took the old bass to the factory, and they took it apart and measured every inch.
Wow.
And we copied that bass. And
because that being, a prototype of the jazz bass, to say nothing of Joe Osborn's, personal workhorse, like your golden hammer, if you will, like it kind of belongs in the Hall of Fame, if not the Smithsonian. That's probably not one that you just want to, ship out to a guy often. And I would imagine if you were to play live, you might bring the reproduction or the new version of the bass as opposed to that.
I didn't understand the last part.
Oh, would you prefer to bring the new version of your bass or the museum piece?
Bring it where?
Oh, to a gig, say if you were to back up Matthew Davidson
well,
or something.
I stopped playing the original big. Well, the frets were getting very worn.
Right.
Wow.
And so I started to have it refretted, and somebody said, no.
Yeah,
Right.
do that.
It's ruined the value.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's just like it was.
And the new bass is a direct modeled after your original, and how, you know, what was I guess the process of putting together your own bass. I mean, that must be a playing the prototypes, working it out, and getting the right feel. How does that match up with the original? Does it fit like a glove?
Yeah, well, the feel is in the neck,
Right.
of course, and that's the first thing that we made sure we copied and measured exactly. So the feel's the same.
Right.
Wow.
Wow. That is great. I want to be able to. If I get one of these basses, will I be able to do something even comparable to your own work?
No.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think we have a winner.
Right, that is correct. Well, Joe, I gotta say, we thank you so much for sharing, this time with us and kind of letting us talk about, your life and your work and your contribution, and obviously all of your. Just the things that you're working on, obviously, with the new bass and producing and whatnot. And we want to just thank you so much from the bottom of our heart for being available to us and sharing this time with us.
Well, I'm honored to have been a part.
Oh, the honor is ours.
Of course.
Thank you.
So, we wish you the best, Joe. And hopefully, maybe sometime in the future we'll get you back on. Maybe we'll get you on with Hal, and we can talk and share some more stories.
Yeah, that would be fun.
I would.
With Hal would be a lot of fun.
I bet it would be a hoot. I would love it. It would be great. Well, and we appreciate it, Joe, and all the best to you and your family, and we hopefully will stay in touch and look forward to having you back on.
Thank you.
You got it, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
There it is. Joe Osborn.